started. Tori, if you could help monitor that box for people waiting in the lobby, I appreciate that. So
Yep, got it.
thank you. So thank you everybody for joining. This is our third workshop in the series. The last one's going to be next week in person up here in Carlsbad. So hopefully everyone can make that, talking about employee engagement strategies. But today we're going to be talking about the intricacies and trends of FSAs and HSAs and a unique partnership. So we have Josh Collins, president of NueSynergy, on the phone. So Josh, thank you for joining. Um,
Thank you.
Before I turn it over to Josh, I just wanted to set the stage for why this conversation matters. Because I know you're probably thinking, why is Mutual of Omaha even involved in the FSAs or HSAs? So we're not directly tied together, but we do share a common belief, and that's that benefits only make an impact when employees truly understand and use them. And I think that's where strong engagement and year-round communication come in. And that's where Mutual and NueSynergy have a common ground. So from our side, Mutual is committed to making these programs easier for employers to offer. In fact, when multiple lines of coverage are offered, oftentimes we can cover the full cost of administration for NueSynergy. And the other big win here is when employees participate in these HSA and FSA programs, they aren't just protecting themselves, but they're also saving their employers money through reduced payroll taxes. So today's not just about pitching a product; it's about uncovering the trends and finding creative ways to help your clients save money and engage their employees, and just bring in ultimately more value to your renewal conversation. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce Josh Collins, president of NueSynergy. Josh, welcome to the Wild Kingdom, my friend.
Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate it. As we get started here, let me share my screen here. Just by way of confirmation, everybody can see my screen.
Yep, gotcha.
Fantastic. All right. So as we get started, please, I'm happy to talk for an hour or 30 minutes or 45 minutes or however long this is, but it's much better if there's some engagement. And to be fair, I know there's probably varying degrees of experience in these plans, but it's highly unlikely that you haven't had some engagement with them. So this is a time to learn, but also a time to really interact. So if you're seeing trends out there that we're not touching on, love to hear, because once again, experiences can certainly vary by market and region. So, but as a high level, we're really going to do a sort of an overall view of a refresher. What are these accounts? What are some of the differences or nuances between these accounts? Overall market trends that we're seeing really as we look at employee engagement. And then we're going to take a step back. We'll have a few survey questions in here just to make sure everybody's still awake. And then lastly, we'll go into some examples on plan designs and just some creative plan designs we've seen and implemented over the years that you may be somewhat familiar with, but hopefully it's going to be interactive and certainly something you can learn from today. So with that, really, we've got three main accounts. And while we're going to really focus in on HSAs and FSAs, because from an overall transactional standpoint, they're the stepbrother, stepsister. It was a type of, engagements from an employer standpoint, but HRAs also play an integral role as we look at plan designs and as we look at how the employer's dollars are impacted based on utilization and how much they contribute to those various accounts. But at a high level, ownership always plays in. So, who owns these accounts or who can open these accounts? Ultimately, these are all employer-sponsored plans at the end of the day. And ownership can vary based on really setup. So generally speaking, the HSA is always going to be owned by the employee. That's one of the biggest, bullet points that is a value add to these types of benefit accounts that certainly the employees see value in. The HRA is almost always the employer. There's some nuances to that where you can establish long-term benefit plans that may sort of mirror the sort of 401k type of benefit that can look and feel like an owned account on behalf of the employee. And then the FSA, this is a misnomer. I should have made this a Q&A question. If you were to ask and survey employees who owns my FSA, they would pretty much 100% of the time say, I own my FSA. It's mine. The reality, though, on the back end is that this is very much an employer-sponsored benefit. And while it is funded pretty much 100% of the time by employee based payroll distributions, that account ultimately is owned by the employer group. And that'll be a key takeaway to remember as we go through some additional Q&A and how some creative things that we're working with Mutual of Omaha on related to how we might be able to use some of those forfeited funds in the future. So in terms of how these accounts work year over year over year, the carryover, this is about almost 10 years old at this point, but the carryover got applied to the FSA account, like I said, about 10 years ago. Prior to that, the old use it or lose it. And that very much has stayed with that account, even though today some of the rules have changed. But I think it's worth noting that as we talk through some of the reasons individuals don't take these accounts or some of the misnomers, if you hear use it or lose it, your flag should go up, because based on most plan designs we see today, that has gone by the wayside. And the carryover component has eliminated one of the biggest barriers to participate in the Flex account for a lot of participants. And tax advantage, that was one of the first things we kicked off. All of these accounts, as long as they are used for qualified medical expenses, are pre-taxed. So no tax to the federal government, both on the employee side and the employer side, most importantly. And interest earned, and how do these funds grow? The HSA, being a bank account based account, typically does have some interest bearing component to it. HRA based on plan design also could as well. The FSA never does. So first trivia question. This was actually in the slide just now, if you were looking at overall contributions. But in terms of contribution strategy and who can contribute to an account, and I'm looking at the chat here, so feel free to throw in a letter. I am keeping note. If we have good participation, we may have some Starbucks gift cards I'll be shipping to Bobby here. So with that, which account type allows contributions from a rich aunt or uncle, or really anybody, to essentially provide contributions to the account and also remain compliant? I see KN, you're the first one. Kira, you got it right. It's an HSA. So I'll make a note of that from a gift card perspective. Thank you. Oh, now everybody's responding.
We got a lot of B's now, Josh.
So not to have the whole presentation be taken up by HSAs, but that is one of the neater things about that particular type of account is the overall flexibility around overall utilization, overall spending, flexibility, save it, spend it later. But we could literally do a whole 1 hour presentation on the nuances of HSAs and the benefits of them and kind of what makes them unique. But thank you for everybody's response on that. Yes, everybody got a B. So as we dive more into trends, this slide should not shock anybody. It's the old adage, everything just keeps going up. So the biggest takeaway from these trends that we're seeing is certainly as deductibles and overall member responsibility continues to go up, the correlation or the requirement for the employee to engage with their healthcare benefit now more than ever is paramount and really a requirement really to engage in the healthcare system. And a thread or a trend you're going to hear throughout this entire presentation really is this. We see a direct correlation between benefit account enrollment, i.e. FSA, HSA, and overall engagement in the benefits plan. So said another way, the typical employee that goes buys the cheapest cost denominator plan, that would be rating a 1 on the 1 out of 10 sector of how I engage. Those participants that take it a step further and enroll in a benefit account, FSA or HSA as an example, we tend to see that engagement jump all the way up to a 6 or a 7. Why, you ask? Well, when you look at overall spending trends, we see a 1 to 1.5 touch points per month for a participant that actually takes an account. And as you'll see here, as we dig in more, leveraging those touch points are going to be key to addressing some of the gaps that you'll see in the surveys later in terms of we're seeing improvements because it's natural. You've got more responsibility. You're going to be forced to engage to a certain degree more than you have in years past. But having that level of engagement and that ability to have a catalyst to engage or take advantage of a various touch point is unique to what these benefits bring to the table. So the next few slides, we've got some survey questions from various sources, really talking to consumers and employer groups about the overall engagement and what they find important. So what I've never forgotten this. There was a quote that I remember seeing several years back that a typical consumer spends more time shopping for a refrigerator than they do their own health care. And if you think about how often we sit on Amazon and just scope out, compare knives or compare TVs or compare anything, and then correlate that to how often we're sitting there comparing our benefits plans, it wouldn't even touch on the same spectrum. So while we are seeing an improvement in the overall engagement, one of the pieces that we're trying to drive home more than ever is encouraging groups and encouraging all of the stakeholders in the benefits arena to look at how we connect the benefit accounts or the accounts in general that drive interaction. We see is an avenue to help address some of the gaps in overall engagement. Meaning this, if I have an FSA account or an HSA account and it's my money, I'm going to tend to shop and research and engage at a varying degree than I might otherwise if I've not taken the initiation or initial effort to enroll in those accounts. From an overall, to take it a step further, when asked, consumers, hey, there's a lot of touch points from all these various benefits. Are you doing any of them? Are you at least downloading the mobile app? Have you registered for the accounts? Are you visiting the poor? Are you calling their call center? The nice thing is if you look at the study over a 10-year trend, this has finally moved above the majority range. So, 57% of all consumers that responded to this survey have done something. They've taken that initial step. The question we now are continuing to ask ourselves is, how do we take that small victory of having that individual take that first step in at least engaging and maintaining that engagement? And to kind of tether this conversation together, we believe that's part of the special sauce in our partnership with Mutual Omaha here. So we're looking at how do we leverage the touch points that come naturally with an FSA when you have a transaction and there's a notification that transactions occurred, or you're getting your monthly statement, or you're looking to see if there's an eligible expense and you're researching. We are connecting those various touch points to reminding individuals that there are other aspects of their benefits package that they've likely enrolled in that they may need to research, because those types of benefits can correlate to one another in terms of an emergency care policy or an LTD policy that they may be, once again, based on their circumstances, not realizing that they should or could engage in that type of plan. So the thread or the trend you're going to hear is really, how do we look more and more to how we can interconnect these various benefits and help simplify or the communications process for the member, so there's not so much noise at the end of the day. So one of the core aspects really of the benefits account is it's a financial tool at the end of the day. And how do we leverage the financial tools, or how are employers leveraging these financial tools to drive certain behaviors that they're trying to achieve from a benchmarking standpoint? So wellness plans, they've been around forever. I use it mainly for a reference purpose, but we look at it more as general lifestyle accounts. And not to be confused with the actual benefit account itself, but the overall lifestyle programs. And I think they've taken a shift towards the positive as you're looking at more proactive, healthy engagements. And how do we tie certain activities and or programs we're rolling out to how we're funding and rolling out these benefit account programs. So, for example, or as you'll see here, the vast majority, close to 70% of employer groups do provide some degree of funding, um, whether it be through a lifestyle account or a direct HRA HSA or something in the middle, to drive certain activities or participation in healthy lifestyles or healthy living at the end of the day. To dig it a layer deeper, what types of activities or what types of behaviors are they trying to really address? I still find it interesting, as much as from an overall smoking standpoint, it's still, that's still up there, 17%. I thought we beat that horse to death, but it's still quite, I attribute that probably to more of the, probably aging population more than anything. But the part that won't be a shocker to anybody are really the first one, this 23%, and this fitness, this 28%. And that's something that I want to dig in on, because the market and the IRS and the government that sort of manages these plans hasn't really caught up to where I think the market is and the need to where we're assigning dollars. And so there can be some misnomers as we talk about what are eligible expenses. Gym memberships is a commonality, continues to get layered in, and for obvious reasons, but it's still not a pre-taxable event for these types of accounts. So from an FSA or an HSA, it is still not a pre-taxed item without some letter of medical necessity or a doctor's note to address a specific condition. However, there's still a multitude of ways to approach this. And lifestyle accounts, which are essentially benefit accounts that are on a post-tax basis, are one of those ways that we're seeing employers sort of address that dollar spend as a way to both monitor, control, and set aside additional dollars to help employers address those pieces. HSAs and FSA contributions on behalf of the employer, though, it's I think an often overlooked approach to look at what are you trying to achieve with your plan, and did you also know that you can tie your overall contribution strategies with these plans to various aspects of your overall benefits package to address these particular pieces. So as we shift a little bit away from overall sort of general market themes and why we see benefit accounts continuing to be a valuable aspect of the overall benefits package, it's worth sort of looking at why people still don't take them. We're hovering around still that 30 to 40% enrollment rate as that ceiling. Certainly when you have one account in place, we get closer to 50% when you've got a mixture of an FSA and an HSA intertwined in the benefits package. But still, we're far from 100% at the end of the day. And some of the reasons why people take these types of accounts, stating the obvious: cost savings, overall tax savings. I know that I'm going to have these expenses. I might as well save the 7.65% from an employer perspective, but I might as well save whatever my tax rate is, whether that's a 15%, 20%, 30% tax rate. I might as well save that 30 cents on the dollar if I'm going to have that expense anyway. Another way to look at this is that shift from my cost today to my costs in the future, planning not just for today and tomorrow, but 3-4 weeks down the road, 3-4 years down the road. And that's why you'll see we would normally advocate that there is not a single bullet approach as you look at benefit accounts. We would advocate for a multi-pronged approach because your populations vary by overall financial and demographic and just what they're going through from a healthcare perspective at that time. And FSA fits in nicely for certain demographics and certain utilization cases. HSA does as well. So just keep that in mind, that all of these can and often do play nice to want to get together in an overall benefits approach. Why do people not take these accounts? Out-of-pocket costs just too high. At the end of the day, I got to have $1 to put in the account. And that's why it's so important as we look at the rolling out certain accounts that we look to see how we coordinate an employer contribution strategy, at least initially, to help employees get the funding started from an overall experience standpoint. Afraid of losing money. We just talked about the use it or lose it piece. While that has been softened greatly with the ability to carry over funds, that still is a misnomer that is carried on with the FSA. So an important piece to continue to debunk as you talk to employer groups and employees. Still the unpredictability. Despite some really vast improvements in these benefit accounts to make them more flexible, there's still, certainly with the FSA, at times a requirement on behalf of the employee to sort of plan and have an idea of what those expenses are going to be. A key takeaway here, if you will, as we look at plan designs, for a group that offers an FSA and offers a carryover, a great way to pitch and address both the fear of loss and the fear of the unknown, how much should I contribute? A great way to approach that is to look at the carryover holistically. So if your group is offering an FSA with a carryover amount, and that does go up year over year over year, just to be clear, look at that, and we'll use $500 as the base number. It's actually in the $650 range at this point. But from that perspective, as you're talking to an employee, what's the harm in putting at least $500 or at least putting in $250, anything below that carryover amount to get you comfortable and used to using that account, because that is a zero risk approach to participating. In all likelihood, they're going to have some degree of expenses, however small or big, that will at least probably encompass that amount. And if they don't, there's no risk of them losing it as long as they remain employed with the employer. So one of the approaches we're taking here at NueSynergy is looking to get to the lowest denominator approach to why people are just not getting off the fence and participating, and allowing people to take baby steps, if you will, into engaging in these profiles. Not just saying, oh, you need to max this out and this is how much you're going to save in tax savings. That's all very, very important. But also looking at how do we eliminate risk on behalf of the employee? Because we are talking to individuals oftentimes that, that $500 is crucial, and it is helping them understand that is a zero risk scenario, can really be the difference between them taking advantage and not taking advantage of the account.
Hey Josh, if I could just
Yes.
pause you real quick. I just think this is really good to unpack, especially the unpredictability and the fear of the unknown. I'm not going to challenge you on that, because I agree that there are like still unpredictable costs, but I think there's a lot of things that have become more predictable in the last few years. Like the health and wellness industry, I think is on track to go past 11 trillion by 2030. And right now it's at like 6. And a couple of years ago, it wasn't even at 4. So with more things becoming just in the daily routine of employees, like whether it's a certain type of health and wellness membership, obviously not all gym memberships are going to qualify, but maybe if it includes like hydrotherapy or like the cold therapy type of stuff, the athletic greens material, or the aura and whoop fitness stuff. I mean, all of those things have just become more popular in people's lives, and maybe that wasn't the case 5 years ago. It just wasn't on the radar. um, all that saying, I think the engagement piece and like the communication of giving people that knowledge of what qualifies and what doesn't could increase the participation. I think it would, just because they know, oh yeah, I already spend $500 a year on this, or $1,000 a year. Why not save 15, 20, 30%?
It's a great point, Bobby, because I would say it's, that as creative and as technology based or focused as we are on driving home support mechanisms on how do we make decisions on various things, it oftentimes can be as basic as looking at what's eligible and looking at how overall spending trends have changed. Certainly in the younger populations. I read a study somewhere that, alcohol consumption's down darn near 80% or something to that degree over the past 5 to 10 years. that's a shift, a big shift in just where the population is going and what's important to them and how they're engaging various things. So to dig in on that a little bit further, the list of eligible expenses is ridiculous, extensive. But I think we always stop at the basics: over-the-counter drugs, prescriptions. If we start to get more creative on what's eligible, in all likelihood, you're likely to, from a marketing standpoint, touch a few more people than you might not otherwise, just simply because they didn't realize those are eligible expenses.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe as a follow-up to this too, we can send something like that out. I'm sure you guys have some material on your portal or on your website, because I think that would just be good as our brokers have these renewal meetings, and maybe they have groups that don't have one of these programs plugged in, or it's really low participation. This can be something they can address pretty quickly.
It's a great point. We'll make sure to have that available to you, everybody.
Thanks, Josh.
Well, the other piece, and I'll be quiet. So this is where this is really cool. We talked about the innovation, and this is also where I'm excited to see how our industry is going to be adopting, the overused AI, if you will. But we're already in test cases now where we are looking at quickly and effectively identifying spending trends, both at the aggregated level and at the individual level, and driving certain recommendations and driving certain shopping opportunities, if you will, to make it easier to use these accounts. On the very basis that we just mentioned, there's a lot of unknowns outside of the Big Ten scenario of what you can use these accounts. And we're going to be leveraging some of these technologies to allow us to, once again, be more effective in driving very personalized utilization pieces for these various accounts. So how are these accounts offered? When are they offered? To what degree are they offered? So one of the interesting aspects of this is, the FSA is the oldest. It's the old dog in the house relative to these benefit accounts. It's been around since the 80s. And the HDHP that everybody's aware of, the high deductible health plan, often going hand in hand with an HSA scenario, continues to grow. I mean, it has been shot out of a cannon, if you will, for the last really 15, 20 years. But at this point, roughly 57% of contributing employers are offering some degree of an HDHP plan. But I thought was interesting here, though, is, and takes to the point that I made earlier, that doesn't mean all the benefit accounts go away and you just offer an HSA. The offering of a high deductible health plan simply affords you some additional options in terms of how these plans can correlate with one another. And despite HSAs continuing to grow, FSAs have remained steadfast and continue to be one of the go-to offerings for virtually all employer groups offering some degree of benefits package. So a key takeaway there. In terms of how employers are contributing to these plans, of those offering high deductible health plans, over half are providing some degree of funding, however small or big. The approaches we've already touched on, whether that's incentive-based approach on activity or just thank you for being an employee, we will give you some subset of funds to contribute to that account. And overall enrollment grows. I will tell you from our standpoint, once individuals take an HDHP, they tend to remain in an HDHP. They don't usually go backwards from that perspective. And in terms of overall population, we are seeing sort of those that are enrolled or have the HHP, roughly 30% of the overall benefits eligible population nationwide are looking at these or currently participating in the HSA as a whole. So, next trivia question. Which account type allows full access to elected amount at the beginning of the plan year, even before contributions are made? So don't get too far in the weeds on this because it could be a trick question, but it's meant to be somewhat straightforward. Man, I tell you what, is this Kira again? You're on it.
Yeah.
Kira, Garrett. Got it. FSA is, or it is FSA. It is FSA. What I meant by trick question. So one of the beautiful parts about an HRA really is that it's a blank piece of paper in a lot of ways. And so overall plan design could drive an upfront first dollar access, but generally as a hard rule, the FSA is the only one that day one is core to their plan. Even before the employees put a single dollar in that account, they have access to that money. So as you look at, and I'll pause here for just a second, or I'll stall here for a second. As we look at the why people take certain things, and you look at, the pros and cons to each account, one of the biggest aspects of why people take the flex account is I can elect the full annual maximum, and day one, before a single payroll deduction has come out, I have access to my full annual maximum. So for those extremely cost conscious employees, or those that are, I would say more paycheck to paycheck scenarios, that is why the FSA continues to be a leading benefit account for those people to help them manage those unforeseen expenses that may come throughout the year. What I always find fascinating is really how these, despite these accounts, generally speaking, being able to reimburse the same level of expenses. So there's a list called 213D expenses from the IRS, and it's generally the rule book in terms of what these accounts can be used for, and it applies universally. But yet you see it's not universal in how these accounts get used. And our approach and why we believe that is, if you look at the FSA, that tends to not grow year over year over year. So you don't have a lot of saving scenarios here outside of the carryover aspect. And so employees are tending to have a much more well-rounded utilization of those accounts simply because they are using that money. That is a this year thing, generally speaking. And so they're going to use it for all aspects of their plan. HRA, a lot of that is predicated on plan design. You have a lot of deductible and medical-based reimbursement plans for an HRA, and those tend to also reimburse pharmacy, which is why you're going to see a massive swath tied to those types of accounts. And the vast majority being used in those buckets, once again, because it's heavily influenced on the plan design, since these are employer-funded dollars. And then the HSA, I found interesting because if you look at the HSA, there is a high, there continues to be a almost a 50-50 split between spenders and savers in these accounts. The last time I looked at this percentage, it's still well into the 90% range of accounts that have money that roll over year over year, however small. It could be a penny, could be tens of thousands of dollars, but still something rolls over every year. That plays into that spending piece. If you look at individual, because with the HSA, you have the ability to not spend that money, right? If I have a $100 expense, I can choose to pay out of pocket and reimburse myself from the HSA next year, 10 years down the road, or I could spend it that day. So we tend to look at this graph from a perspective of what are your bigger ticket items that you may not want to float, that you may want to go ahead and use your HSA to fund. Those tend to be your medical and prescription benefits. And your dental and your vision, your other, those tend to be on the smaller end of the expense train. So we tend to see the HSA maybe not getting used for those expenses, and that employee or participant keeping that money in the HSA, allowing it to grow because they can fund those smaller day-to-day items themselves. So just once again, an interesting setup in terms of how these accounts correlate to overall utilization. Another question. So which account type allows tax-free withdrawals? I touched on this a minute ago. Tax-free withdrawals for Medicare premiums and long-term care insurance after 65. Carrie, you're a star pupil today. Annette, HSA, that's right. That's right. So one of the little known facts about the HSA is, as I like to say, I fund my HSA before I fund my 401k. And one of the biggest reasons around that is this. Um, the HSA and the FSA, I'm sorry, the 401k and the HSA have very similar tax advantages, very similar investment capabilities. And being able to um, both take advantage of those tax benefits, but when I retire, the 401k, anything I take out has some degree of taxable income related to it, right? The HSA, I get the best of both worlds. As long as I use it for medical, I will never pay taxes on it. But once I am over 65, the penalty for using that HSA for non-medical expenses is now gone. And I'm only taxed at whatever my current tax rate is, which same as the 401k. So if you look at how you can use those dollars in your HSA, you have both a continuing non-taxable aspect of that account as well as an everyday living expense aspect of that account. So that's not on that's an often forgotten benefit, if you will, of that particular HSA account. So I'm going to shift away in terms of overall trends, and we're going to talk about some plan designs, some unique plan designs. Hopefully, some of them are familiar, or better yet, before I move into plan designs, I'm going to pause for a minute. Any questions? Any feedback? Anything I touched on? They're like, I didn't know that. Just out of curiosity.
I think it was really cool to see the different diagrams, even just FSA being more short-term spending. That's how I was looking at it too. And then HSA is like, hey, this is going to build and I'm going to use it when I have a big, medical or pharmaceutical expense. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yes, I think the retirement aspect and the ability, and we've done a lot of these presentations, and it's interesting how few people realize that they don't have to use their HSA account today. They still think it has to be, well, once again, because their experience is all from the FSA. And they're just thinking, once again, I got to use it today.
Josh, I don't
So
know
as
if you're
I
going to
move,
get into
yes,
this.
good, Bobby.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if you're going to get into it later, but like, are there certain industries that you would recommend, or maybe even not just industries, but demographics that you would recommend FSAs versus HSAs for?
Yes, and if we were just doing an HSA presentation, it would be no, everybody does an HSA. But the reality around this is it's just not true. And I think that scenario is going to be a couple questions that I would ask, and based on those answers would drive this. So as you're talking to employer groups, the HSA is typically looked at initially as, oh, we want to move to a high deductible health plan. We need to better shift risk and cost. And this is a great way to do it. And there's a financial incentive to do so. Um, the other piece is look at your pot, so as an employer, if you're looking at this, are you going to fund the HSA? Do you intend to put something meaningful in the HSA? If the answer is no, then I will say I might shy away from that plan, particularly if you've got an employee population that is maybe on the lower end of the salary range, if you will. So if the vast majority of your employees are, of the lower comped persuasion, you might need to look at that. If I'm not in a position or that's not part of my funding strategy, the FSA may still continue to be a preferred mechanism for the reasons that we've mentioned. It affords an individual to pay over time, yet have access day one to the full bucket of money, which once again is a key driver for those from a financial perspective are looking more at the transactional piece, not necessarily the long-term savings component of the benefit.
Kira, do you have a
Yes, go ahead.
question?
Yes, Kira.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So one of the things I think that is frustrating, at least for me, being in this industry for a while, is HSAs with employers who want to offer the limited FSA, because then employees just have money coming out of every end, and then they're not using it. Um, in this space for NueSynergy, are you finding ways to educate employees and employers about the pros and mostly the cons of offering both of those plans side by side?
Yes, and I would agree with you. We've we tend to shy away from encouraging employer groups to offer an LSA. The hard reality, and you touched on it, is this: if you're talking to somebody, and we do put this in well, let me put it this way: we have the option to put this in. It almost sells against it, but when we're talking to an employee and we say, "Look, are you fully funding your health savings account?" No. Then you don't need the LSA or the limited purpose FSA.
Yeah.
You should not even consider it. It's just going to confuse your life. There's no point. They reimburse the same exact things. The only
Right.
reason you should do both is if you're using the HSA as a savings account and you're maxing it out to the absolute top, and you have a ton of dental and vision expenses. You know, you're all your kids are in braces this year. You're getting, and so it just makes sense to use a transactional account to further your pre-tax ability. So to answer your question more directly, Kira, yes, we've actually, for some of our groups that still want to offer the limited purpose, we don't see the limited purpose account being offered as much anymore, to be clear. And for those that do, when we're at risk of confusion, we will actually add certain sections to the communications that just tell employees that, hey, this is when this account makes sense. And it is really, if you're maxing out the HSA, then let's have a conversation. If you're not, keep it simple, stay in one account.
Fair. Thank you.
From a plan design, the next three, not in direct succinct here, but the next three slides where we talk about plan design, a lot of this is looking at high deductible plans as the base and making some suggestions on ways to layer in various benefit accounts that you might not have thought about prior. So generally speaking, this is sort of a setup slide, but individual employer groups tend, as you all know, move towards HDHP plans with an HSA as a primary driver of cost savings at the end of the day. No matter what we want to say, and look, that continues to be a key driver in those benefits. We would continue to heavily encourage employer groups that while that is the driver, be strategic and don't look at this as I'm going to save money year one. Look at that as a 3-year, minimal 2-year cost saving strategy, because there is and will continue to be a direct correlation between employer funding day one and overall general participation in the HSA ongoing. And it starts with the employer group. And I don't know how familiar everybody is with these overall funding strategies, but they can be rather vast in terms of you've got a lot of flexibility month over month, quarter over quarter, lump sum day one. You can do lump sum, you break it up January and July. And if you weren't hired in June, or if you were hired Q1 or Q2, well, you missed out on the January funding. So there's ways you can protect your funding strategy and without discriminating, to be clear. You can tie contributions to some degree of participation, however minimal. We've seen groups simply say, look, you got to do something, man. You got to do $25 per pay period, $50 per pay period or per month. And that's all we're going to require. And we'll fund whatever our funding package is going to be on top of that. So whether you knew it or not, there's multitude of ways to approach that. But I would always lead with this. There needs to be some shared responsibility each year one in order to get people started in the account and get them over the proverbial hump of what those upfront costs might be. And I'm going to speed up here because I can tell when I look at my clock. From a pros and cons approach, and this is true, and you can read as well as I can, but the biggest one is how these dollars are looked at. And that is really important in these next couple of slides, because when you contribute to an HSA, it's both a pro and a con, depending on who you're asking, but that money is now the employee's money. It's theirs. No taking it back. No take backs. The HRA, that remains with the employer. So essentially I can give an employee $100 in an HSA, and if they don't spend it, I've still spent the $100. I can give an employee $100 value in an HRA, but if they don't spend it, the $100 comes back to me. And there's, once again, pros and cons to both scenarios, but that's going to be paramount to some of the plan designs that we're looking at here. But before I do, which account types revert unused funds back to the employer at the end of the year, unless carryovers allowed? Partially right. Partially right. It's D. Kara. Kara got it. It's both. It's both the HRA and the FSA. So that carryover, that those funds going back to the employer, once again, is a key plan design aspect as we look at overall funding strategy. Because I think it's important. I mean, you all are dealing with the financial well-being of these employers, and why are we doing all of this and offering these plans? And the pie is not endless. And so as we look at funding strategies, you can marry the two together to help get the same goal. So we look at a couple designs where we have HRAs with HSAs. And this one is where, I don't know if you all knew this, but you, as long as you do not provide funding below the IRS minimums for a high deductible health plan, you remain compliant. So in this example, you can have an employer provide still have an HSA, allow the employer to maybe put a little bit in the HSA if they'd like to, or leave that full responsibility to the employee. But you're essentially going in and you're buying a $3,000 deductible, individual deductible, $6,000 family deductible, and you're going to layer in an HRA that will fund that deductible all the way down to a predefined amount. So you're doing your own deductible. So in this scenario, you can blow out a $1,500 deductible, employee deductible, through your HRA, and that employee is responsible for paying their portion of the deductible with the HSA. So why might we do that? For the same reasons that we just mentioned in terms of how these funds are used. I think we can all appreciate that insurance companies don't generally go out of business, and that's because not 100% of the employees are using all of the benefit. This holds true from a perspective of this can eliminate some of the fear of high deductible health plans by not rolling out a $5,000 deductible or a $10,000 deductible, knowing that there's often minimal risk to the overall population going below a certain threshold. And you can fund that account down to, say, $3,000 deductible. And then you roll out an HDHP that in many ways is going to be a richer benefit without necessarily having to buy the full freight from the carrier. Out of curiosity, you can just maybe a thumbs up. Has anybody offered any plans like this or discussed any plans like this with your employer groups in the past? Good. Good. We continue to see the popularity in these. Once again, because as you look at the employer's funding bucket, they really like the idea of minimizing risk to their employees while also controlling the overall overhead or umbrella spend of a benefits pie. And it's also a nice way by not eliminating all the benefits that come with an HSA. So it's a nice way to marry the two together. Last example really just goes full bore on the HRA, and it piggybacks off the previous account where you lean in on a flexible account. The flexible accounts, that's the employee's vehicle in which they can reimburse themselves for any out-of-pocket expenses they may incur, but you're going in and you're layering in or minimizing the overall risk to the employee by applying a self-funded portion of the deductible, which oftentimes can be cheaper than buying that plan directly from the carrier. So with that, I've come to the end of the presentation until you get to hear a little bit about us. I'm going to pause for a minute. Bobby, any questions you've got related to that or team, any questions that you'd like to ask?
I mean, my biggest takeaway here, Josh, is there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat. and no one client is the same as the next one. So I just want to kind of be able to do a shout out to you. Thanks for going through all these examples, and you know, our brokers on the call. If you guys want to be chatting through these more, you know, Josh is happily available to you know, have these consultative approaches with your clients, because it depends on industry, demographic, contributions, what kind of medical plans are they trying to offer, what's their main goals. So I appreciate you just walking through all those examples, and I'm sure there's several more we didn't even touch on.
Absolutely. And thank you, Bobby, and thank you everybody here for spending some time. I know we're entering busy season and it's early in your neck of the woods, so thank you so much for spending an hour with me. Just by way of segue to what Bobby mentioned, we are in your neck of the woods. We do have boots on the ground in California, and whether it's a in-person meeting or over the phone, I think one of the key takeaways is, and you all can appreciate this, the devil's in the details. And while some of these plans can be offered, just generally speaking, without a lot of lift, what makes this special sauce, and I think what is a differentiator with us, is our willingness and ability to have a consultative, strategic discussion with you on how these various benefits can layer in. And then more importantly, our partnership with Mutual Omaha and how we can connect the overall engagement piece, both initially and ongoing, to really put together a more robust benefits package than you might have otherwise.
Yeah, and to touch on that, I think everyone here on the call is familiar with our enrollment team here at Mutual called Steps. You know, part of what Josh is talking about is our texting tools and our apps that we can build to reach out to employees, not just during open enrollment saying, hey, what's changing? What are we offering? But throughout the year. And I think NueSynergy's got some great technology that actually does, you know, real-time text when they swipe their card, and it tells them if this was eligible or not. So I just think that knowledge is super impactful. Um, and then, you know, circling back to the initial conversation from earlier, NueSynergy and Mutual have reached that agreement of being able to offer some discounted pricing, if not fully subsidized, when you write with Mutual. So potentially a free admin solution for these types of accounts, and we help you enroll it. I think that's really the pitch here, at least with our partnership. But regardless, Josh, this was awesome information. I hope everyone got some good information out of it.
Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate it. And lastly, I know everybody uses Ease and Employee Navigator, and that's a big driver on a lot of groups. Just always worth noting, we're fully integrated with them as well, which once again kind of further removes friction points as you look at data migration. But Bobby, thank you again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And if there's any additional questions we can answer, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Josh. Thanks everyone
Thanks,
for
Bobby.
joining.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
All right. Till next time. See y'all.
Thank you.